So the jobs report came out a few days ago, and Trump and the Republicans made the giant mistake of bragging. So they bragged about it. Here's why that's absurd. David Dayen spoke to The Hill about this. Take a look.
Earlier this week, the stock market hit a 3-month high on the prospect of economic recovery, and at the same time, Bloomberg reported this week that only 1/3 of unemployment claims have been processed so far. So how did Wall Street rebound so fast?
Executive editor of the American Prospect, David Dayen, has a piece that explains exactly this, and he joins us now. Great to see you, David.
Good to see you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, this is one of the things that, it's kind of a hallmark of the dysfunction of our times. You have mass unemployment. You have 74%, I think, of the American public saying we're headed in the wrong direction. Millions being kicked off of health insurance, unable to make rent, chaos in the streets, and yet stock market's doing great. What's going on?
Well, it's really two words, and the two words are Federal Reserve. So if you actually dig in to the stock numbers and all the capital markets, really, not just stocks, you see that there was a deterioration in February and particularly in March, and everything ends on March 23rd, and there's this complete bounce back. Now, what happened on March 23rd? What was on that day that the Federal Reserve made an announcement that it would essentially do whatever it takes to prevent the investors from taking losses from the coronavirus crisis. That included the purchase of corporate debt, which had never done in its entire history. And just the signal of that, just the announcement that everybody would be protected, followed by the CARES Act, which gave the sort of muscle behind that announcement by giving $500 billion to Treasury that it could use as part of this money cannon of $4.5 trillion that the Fed had at its disposal. That all was enough. And everything really proceeded from there. Stocks went way back up. Corporate bond ETFs that track corporate bond markets went way back up. Every major corporation floated debt, and everything sort of went back to normal for the markets.
And David, could you compare that? What's the disparity between the markets and then the real-time economic conditions for actual working Americans?
Well, it's interesting that we're talking today because we just had this good jobs report of 2.5 million increase in jobs in May. However, that was coming off this incredible cratering in April, loss of over 20 million jobs. So, everybody's crowing here that we got back about 10% of what was lost. We're still seeing reports like a report from the Census Bureau that over almost half of all Americans lost income in the last couple months of this crisis. That shows up in the job statistics, but it's also just cuts to income from people who are working, whether they're getting furloughs or pay cuts or things like that. So there's incredible economic pain out there. It's masked a little bit by increased unemployment and these one-time stimulus checks, but that's all temporary. Yet the benefit to stocks and to investors is really permanent. And that's really the difference here. Congress could have given as much support to ordinary working people as they did to the investor class. But instead, we have this bifurcation. Everything that individuals got was time limited and temporary, and everything that investors got was endless and enduring.
So the jobs report came out, and there were 2.5 million jobs that were created. And then Trump and the Republicans went out there and they were bragging about it, and they've been talking about V-shaped recovery. We're going to have V-shaped recovery. It's going to be tremendous. We're on our way back. And as David Dayen is talking about here, that was a 10% bounce back from all that we've lost. So even the official unemployment rate is still, I believe, 13.3%, which puts us in the ballpark of what the official unemployment rate was at the peak of the Great Recession, and they're out there bragging about it. Okay, now, he explains what's really going on here, and it's stunning when you look at the details. So the reason why the market has bounced back is that we've basically said that we're fully implementing corporate socialism, and the investors can't lose no matter what they do. And so the Fed stepped in, and they're buying corporate debt, which is the first time in history that they've ever done that. And you have this like total socialization. It's the old saying, privatize the profits, socialize the losses. All the losses are being socialized, and regular people are being left out to dry. So you have this complete decoupling of the stock market and the investor class and the elite from your average American. Now, he goes on to say in that clip, eventually, in one way or another, this is going to catch up. And there will be like a moment of reckoning, because you can't have a situation. It's always been somewhat decoupled how the market is doing from your average American. But it's never been this bad, because the actual unemployment rate is over 20%, which is, the U6 unemployment rate, which is like Great Depression territory. And he just said half of Americans lost wages during the crisis so far. And the crisis is not over. So, yes, of course, we're not at the bottom yet. And Trump and the Republicans are out there acting like we're at the bottom. Meanwhile, 70% of the stimulus was spent. Now, before the last jobs report, none of the stimulus money was spent. So the stimulus package blew its load. 70% is spent. And then now what's going to happen when that runs out? What's going to happen? Now, again, the market may continue to rise or relatively stay steady. I don't know. Could be, because everything's been socialized. The Fed will not let the investors fail. The Fed will prop up the market come hell or high water. But regular people are already getting obliterated, and they will get more obliterated. So we could have bailed out the people effectively. We could have done universal basic income, done Medicare for all in the middle of a pandemic. We could have done the temporary nationalization of wages like they did in Germany. And by the way, they have a 3.9% unemployment rate. 3.9%. They kept it low by nationalizing wages temporarily. We didn't do that here. So now we have an actual unemployment rate that's about 20%. And we have this total decoupling of how the stock market is doing from your average American. So the pain and the devastation and the poverty that's out there, it's not being reflected in your traditional indicators. And I think Trump and the Republicans are in for a rude awakening, man. Right now, Biden is a giant favorite to win the presidency, because you can't, like, he seems to think that, oh no, we're actually on the road to recovery for regular people, and like this jobs report is an indicator of that. Nothing could be further from the truth. What we've done is fully socialized the stock market, let them know you can't fail no matter what, and left regular people out to dry. And so those regular people are the ones who vote. And I've never seen anything like this, man, in my life. It's almost like a parody of how elite, corrupt, and out of touch the 1% are. I mean, to basically rush in and the first thing you do is prop up the stock market and everybody else is dying. Like, eventually those chickens are going to come home to roost, dog. There's no escaping that reality. You can't escape it for that long. And David Dane explains how something's going to break. Something's going to break. I think he brings up commercial real estate as the thing that could be the catalyst. But, I mean, we're already in a devastating economic circumstance, and it's only going to get worse. And so, don't believe the silly bragging. What has happened is there's been a full decoupling of the stock market and how corporations and the wealthy are doing. They got bailed out to the hilt, effectively $5 trillion in a bailout package that Steve Mnuchin decides where it goes. And then on top of that, the Federal Reserve, which is basically quasi-independent, they're spending $1 trillion a day, or they were, to prop up the markets and say, no matter what, you're not going to lose. So they rushed in, immediately bailed out the wealthy and the corporations, and regular people are dying. Imagine if they, with that sense of urgency, they bailed out regular people as opposed to bailing out the rich. Oh, we'd be in a much different scenario now. But instead, you got Democrats and Republicans saying we can't afford stuff like Medicare for all. But apparently the Fed can afford $1 trillion a day out of thin air to prop up the market, and $5 trillion Congress can afford in a bailout package that pretty much all goes to corporations and the wealthy. Oh, this is so devastating. Just wait until the crisis gets even worse. When they allow foreclosures and evictions, it's going to be a crisis on that front. I mean, it's going to get bad, guys. Buckle up.